Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the confusing and mysterious nature of transmedicalists, what they are, what they believe, and offer talking points against them. As always, this video will be broken up into chapters that you can see either on the video progress bar or in the description. But with all that said, let's get into it. Before I start talking about transmedicalists, I first need to talk about their target, non-binary people. I know there will be a lot of only two genders types hearing about non-binary people as a concept and then reflexively stating, wrongly, that there are only two genders. Briefly, let's separate sex and gender and explain how a third and more genders can exist. I'll even give you an example of a third gender being accepted in society, and you can look into that more yourselves, though I'll likely end up making a video on it soon anyway, so you can just wait for that if you'd like. Anyway, let's start with sex. Your biological sex is, well, a term used to describe your biology, as it says in the name. To paraphrase the United States National Institute of Health, sex refers to biological differences between females and males, including but not limited to chromosomes, sex organs, and endogenous hormones. Adding on to this, sex is a spectrum, and where you lie on that spectrum is determined by the aforementioned traits. You can be either male, female, or intersex. Woo, spooky, I know. Intersex people are sadly usually forgotten about, probably because intersex people tend to go through genital mutilation at birth, in an attempt to make them look more normal and acceptable to our arbitrary social rules. Intersex people are neither male nor female. But before you introduce your sublime comedy, no, they aren't attack helicopters. For the love of fucking god, if I hear this one more time. For example, they can have a vagina with male chromosomes, that being XY, a penis with female chromosomes, that being XX, or they could have a completely different combination of chromosomes altogether, such as XXXY, XXX, or XXY. Now, of course, there are many more combinations, and not every intersex person is the same. In fact, no person's biology is the same, so to shove us into the boxes of male and female is a bit silly. Video on that coming soon. Anyway, gender. Oh god. And for this, I'm going to use the help of beloved scientist and TV personality person, Bill Nye.
One thing's clear about sexuality. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. Female or male, gay or straight, pink or blue. We were taught to see these as binary. Now we're realizing it's more like a kaleidoscope. And this stuff isn't just for adults. Parents know this already. Kids explore gender, expression, attraction before they've ever heard of a spectrum. Take sex. We used to think it was pretty straightforward. X and a Y chromosome for males, two X's for females. But we see more combinations than that in real life. And even for people with just two sex chromosomes, hormones can vary wildly. So can anatomy. What makes someone male or female isn't so clear-cut. How about attraction? Some people argue the natural thing is to only be attracted to the opposite sex. But in practice, it ain't so simple, kids. Some people are gay, some are bi, some are asexual, and some will take whatever they can get. You know what I mean? It's another sexy sliding scale. When you throw in gender, it gets even more colorful. By 3 or 4, most kids identify with a gender, and it doesn't always match the sex they were assigned at birth. And a person's gender identity may change over their lifetime. And culture is getting us new ways to express all of this. How you dress, how you act, talk, how you present yourself to the world. It should be up to you. Sure, this might make things confusing for those who insist everyone pick an M or an F. But people, we have to listen to the science. And the science says we're all on a spectrum.
Again, quoting the National Institute of Health, gender refers to socially constructed and enacted roles and behaviors which occur in a historical and cultural context, and vary across societies over time. All individuals act in many ways that fulfill the gender expectations of their society. Gender can be separated into two categories: gender expression and gender identity. Gender expression is how you dress, look, and act. For example, a tomboyish gender expression will be considered masculine, and a femboyish gender expression will be considered feminine. Feminine. I still can't say that. There are of course many different combinations to this, but those are just examples. What is masc or femme is not innate to our biology. For example, historically, women wearing pants was considered gender non-conforming, whereas now it's, for the most part, completely normal. There are of course many more examples of our current gender roles and expectations not matching up with historic ones, but there are so many that I need another video to go over it, or for this one to be an hour long, which I really don't want. What is masculine or feminine is decided by society as a whole. Even penises and vaginas being masc or femme, boy or girl, is completely arbitrary and itself a product of society. Shocking, I know. It's silly that even things such as colours have a gender, with pink for girls and blue for boys. Okay, so your gender identity. Your gender identity describes how you see yourself and your own gender. Your assigned gender at birth, contrary to your chosen gender identity, is in reference to whatever your doctor said you were when you were born, either boy or girl, because of course you can't be intersex. For example, if your assigned gender at birth is a boy and you identify as a man, you're cisgender, and if your assigned gender at birth is a boy and you identify as a woman, you're transgender. Your gender is a matter of choice and identity. Now, just to separate the two, having dysphoria is not a choice, being trans is. You choose your identity, but your identity can be heavily influenced by dysphoria, whereas your sex is just your body and its inner workings. See, we got to it in the end, didn't we? Non-binary people can logically exist because gender is a matter of choice and society. Now, when I say non-binary people can exist because gender is a matter of society and choice, I of course don't mean you can identify as an attack helicopter. That isn't an epic own, you're not owning anybody. You can't identify as a real material thing, such as, for example, a Samsung UE50 TU7020 2020 HDR 4K Ultra HD Smart TV 50-inch with TV Plus and black. Yeah, I know, it's hilarious when you say the full name and description of a product with the preface I sexually identify as. I fucking hate when people do that, it's so unfunny. I'm sure everyone is fucking rolling on the floor laughing right now in tears. You can only identify as, well, an identity. It's an idea, a concept. Your gender is not something you can pick up and hold. Now, of course xenogenders and such exist, but I'm not going to comment on that as it's not something I understand. And unlike most transphobes, I don't plan on attacking something when I have absolutely no clue what I'm talking about. To finish off this way too long segment, I'm going to offer the aforementioned example of a third gender being accepted in a society. And I know this particular example was probably expected if you know anything about culture or gender, but regardless, the Two-Spirit peoples in a lot of Native American tribes, both in modern times and historically, are a great example of third and fourth genders being accepted in a given society. To wrap up this segment, gender is how society defines it. It's a social construction, meaning nothing is stopping anyone from identifying as non-binary. Transmedicalist is a very vague term. There are, of course, as with all things, several ideas under its umbrella, but I'm just going to use the definition spouted by its very own name. To be trans, you must either medically transition or be medically diagnosed with gender dysphoria. It's a little weird to define being trans by your own personal suffering at the hands of dysphoria, and to say those who haven't gone through that aren't trans, but I digress. Transmedicalists also tend to be assimilationists. Let's use Blair White, who made a music video with Tom MacDonald of all people, as an example. Generally speaking, this means that they want for themselves and every other trans person to act like just a stereotypical woman, and not express themselves being trans. Or, of course, more specifically, non-binary. This could be seen as an appeal to cis people, which is one of the main goals of transmedicalism. I think there is a place for trying to get cis and transphobic people to understand trans people, but in doing so we shouldn't throw other trans people under the bus just because society will see them as weird or hard to understand. Acceptance isn't worth it if we don't get acceptance for all trans people. We should be proud of our identity, expression, and ourselves no matter who we are, how we act, or what we look like. An instance of Blair White trying to appeal to transphobes is not only her entire career, but this clip I'm about to show you. Now, keep in mind this is one of the only Blair White videos I've watched recently, with the only other one being the one I used in my gender neutral pronouns video. So I'm not sure if she acts like this in every video, but let's hope not.
And I know this video is without a doubt going to piss off the alphabet people, okay? But I have to be completely honest with my feelings about this, and the best place to start is a definition so everyone knows exactly what we're talking about here. Non-binary, defined as denoting or relating to a gender or sexual identity that is not defined in terms of traditional binary oppositions such as male and female, or homosexual and heterosexual. So that means identifying as both genders or neither gender, identifying as a third gender, an 87th gender. The list goes on and on. It's basically whatever you can imagine. There's someone who identifies as it at this point. And so right off the bat, this is very different from my experience as a trans woman, just a plain old trans woman. Remember when the conversation used to be being born a boy, transitioning to a woman, moving on, and vice versa? That is no longer the conversation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's pretty hard to watch. She's trying so desperately to be one of the good trans people, the normal trans, the alphabet army head ass. Come on dude, you're trans. This is a common trope among true scum, with true scum being another word for trans medicalist. And honestly, I think it's an accurate descriptor to call them and their beliefs a bit scummy. Not to muddy the waters too much though, if you're a true scum you're welcome to keep watching. Please give me all of the cheap hits of dopamine from seeing my monthly watch time go up. Okay, just a heads up, since I'm vaguely referring to Blair White, I'm going to use feminine terms to describe the group that is transmeds. True scum also commonly cite their female brain, even though medically there isn't really a distinction. But that's a field way out of my depth, I'm not a neuroscientist. So they cite their supposedly female brain as the reason for them being trans, despite the fact that, as we discussed earlier, your biology and gender are not the same thing. Yeah, see, it was worth it to go over gender and sex for 7 minutes before getting into the actual topic. You are not inherently trans because you experience dysphoria or have a quote-unquote female brain. From what I know, Blair White calls herself a transsexual. At least that's what I saw in her debate with uncontroversial political and media figure Vaush. He's also a horse enthusiast, but don't ask him about it. Honestly, I'm just waiting for her to refer to herself as a transvestite. I wouldn't be surprised. She calls herself a transsexual in an attempt to separate herself from non-binary people, and trans people that don't experience dysphoria. Because, as I said, she tries so hard to act like the good trans person. The token trans person that conservatives can use as an example of the famed one good minority. She's not like all of those crazy blue-haired SJWs, she's just a quote-unquote normal woman. But with all of the generality out of the way, let's move on to more specific arguments. I spoke on this briefly again in my gender neutral pronouns video, but regardless, I'm going to expand on it more here. The idea that you need a gender dysphoria to be trans is completely ignoring both gender euphoria and what it means to be trans. Gender euphoria is the feeling that, for example, a feminine presenting trans woman would get when wearing skirts, dresses, makeup, and other feminine products. It isn't just the alleviation of dysphoria, but instead added euphoria that comes from participating in these feminine acts. Some trans people, shockingly, don't experience dysphoria, and instead only experience gender euphoria. Being trans is all too commonly described as being in the wrong body, which isn't all true. Some trans people feel okay in their current body, transition, and then feel even better. An argument I've heard before is that to have euphoria from expressing your gender, there must have been some dysphoria in there, but that's just a untrue. Here, take a look at this professional graph I made in MS Paint that'll surely explain it better. Being trans simply means transitioning, or more so identifying as a gender other than the one you were assigned at birth. Something I've heard Blair say in the past is that she's not saying being non-binary isn't valid, just that it isn't being trans, which both goes against the widely accepted and utilitarian definition I just presented, and also invalidates non-binary people, since it's rather ironically a binary dichotomy between being trans and cis. Saying a group isn't trans is calling them cis. This is something that annoys me a lot. Since being a minor and trans, this is something heavily targeted towards me. The concept of a transgender is a usually younger person pretending or acting trans because, well, it's just trendy. Now, of course, none of these people actually exist, and it's just a straw man used against trans children. ContraPoints, who I know is a controversial figure among leftists and trans people, made a fairly good video on this that I recommend you all check out. This argument is one very similar to something you'd hear from just a regular cis transphobe, and I myself am starting to notice a considerable amount of overlap. Really makes you think. They tend to say that we should tell young trans people that they aren't trans because they'll just end up detransitioning, further soiling the name of trans people, despite the fact that most trans people realize they're trans before they're 18, and only 0.08% of trans people willingly detransition. So the facts and logic aren't really on hers or Ben Shapiro's side. We shouldn't just bully young trans people to an audience of hundreds of thousands of people like Blair White does, but instead advocate for more puberty blockers, of which are completely reversible with zero ramifications, better gender therapy, and being young and trans to be less stigmatized. It should be socially okay to explore your gender and sexuality. We shouldn't punish that with further transphobia, especially from other trans people.